So Matt, I don't know how to put this delicately. Not having a great season, are you?
We're having a shit season.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Secure the Bag. We've been away for a while, so there's a lot to talk about. I'm Jackson, and I'm here with Matt. How are you, Matt?
Yeah, good. Thanks yourself. Or well, not doing too good. After today, Chelsea lost to Borough 1-0
Mm,
in the
I saw that.
Cup. But we're gonna breeze past that for now. We might touch on that a bit later.
Yeah, I know we'll be talking about a lot of mid-table teams this episode, so it's relevant to our conversation. All right.
We'll be talking about West Ham in a few
But
weeks.
yeah, it's fine. It's fine. We'll get to Chelsea and mid-table mediocrity at the end of this podcast. I
Yeah,
think
sure.
we've got to start with the European Super League because this is something that's sort of come back into the news since we did the last podcast episode. So
Yeah, for
Matt,
sure.
do you want to tell people how did this come up in conversation for us right before the ruling broke?
Ooh, um, this would have come up was a phone call between Jackson and myself talking about the points deduction system and the results of financial fair play deductions. Like we've seen earlier in the season, we've seen Everton get hit with a 10-point deduction for breaching of financial fair play. And Jackson and myself were having discussions about what that could mean for Chelsea and Manchester City. Now, we know that they've both breached this financial fair play that the UEFA set, but in saying that, they are also two big market teams, and these two big market teams draw a lot of money to the Premier League. So, what was going to happen if they receive the same or similar points deduction than what Everton did? Because I believe Everton was only over their financial fair play by, correct me if I'm wrong, Jackson, about what, 20 million euro or something like that, 20 million pounds, something around that caliber. So they weren't really over too much, and they received a 10-point deduction. But the main talking point that sort of sparked the conversation about the Super League was the fact that if you look from 2007, 2008, when Manchester City was taken over up until the current day right now, if you collated all their points together that they've got from all those seasons and then apply the same deduction method as what UEFA applied to Everton for their financial fair play breach, Manchester City would have a total of 6 points for those whole seasons combined. And bear in mind, Manchester City got over 100 points in one of their seasons. Now,
Mm.
think about that. Think about the result that that would have on Manchester City and Chelsea if they had the same deductions as what Everton did. They'd just be starting to drop and drop and drop. They'd drop rapidly through the Premier League, through Championship, League One, League Two. They could even drop out of being a professional team if they receive the same penalties as what Everton have done.
But
But
and I said it at the time though, is that they would make the punishment would be strict if they ever punish these teams, but
mm,
it would never be allowed to, and it's like there would be a ceiling on that kind of punishment. Like it wouldn't be allowed to go to the point where these teams get relegated. Yes, they would be knocked out of potentially Champions League football for
yeah,
a season, but they would have a ceiling and say, this is it. The punishment ends here, like a maximum sentence. Because at the end of the day, they do make the league a lot of money. So there would be limits on how they could go. But it does demonstrate how big the financial crime is if they're found guilty. Like it is like does demonstrate the scale of it all. But
exactly.
I think from that conversation, I think it was like we were talking about what would happen in the scenario that those teams were punished, and you were saying, oh, they could join the European Super League.
Yeah, it was a little throwaway comment just to see if I could get a reaction from Jackson.
My reaction was no way, no how.
And it's actually really funny. I've got this up right now. It's a tweet that happened pretty much straight after this phone call, and it was unexpected. I opened up X, and it was the first thing that popped up. It said UK government after hashtag Super League ruling says they will be legislating to introduce a football regulator that will stop clubs from joining any similar breakaway competitions in the future. what will England clubs do now?
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, it was just so happened to be a very relevant conversation for everything that was going to go down. But my opinion is still the same. No way, no how.
Yeah.
Like, so just a rundown for anyone who lives under a rock. Uh, so a ruling in Europe now says that the way that UEFA tried to block the European Super League before was unlawful. So the European Super League, the people who are running it, A2, A22, they're going to have another crack at it. At the end of the day, UEFA isn't restricted from doing anything. They just can't do what they did before. But A22 feels it's got enough legal cover to have a crack at this again. But even then, the English clubs won't get involved. That's not going to happen
No.
between the fans, between the UK government, between the Premier League. It's just not going to happen.
And now the fact that
Bayern Munich won't do it either. Neither will PSG. None of them are going to do it.
yeah, and now the fact that they're bringing into this football regulator will also make it harder for English teams to potentially join if they were going to join, which would be very unlikely.
Yeah.
I think the main drive for this Super League is probably La Liga teams looking at Barcelona and Real Madrid, essentially. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jackson, here, but those seem to be the two major teams that were pushing for a Super League, especially at the beginning of all the Super League talks.
Yeah. And I mean, they were pushed, but it's very difficult for now them to, at the end of the day, they might really be interested in this. They might have those same clubs, because as you said, they were like the masterminds. If they go this again, the same obstacles that meant they had to pull back in the first place are still there, if not worse. Like the Liverpool owner had to go on the record and apologize. How
Yeah.
how's he going to go back to the fans with any credibility, any dignity after revoking that, going, well, actually, I don't apologize, I'm going to give it another go and join this new Super League thing? That it's just not going to happen. And I mean, if you add to that, we talked about like everyone who couldn't join the first time or didn't want to, when Bayern Munich and PSG weren't interested from the start, when the Premier League clubs dropped out. And now, apparently, a new rule's been put in by Serie A, which says any club that tries to join will be kicked out of Serie A.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean,
So,
you look at when they first tried to bring the Super League in, 9 out of the 12 clubs involved, 6 of them were from the English Premier League, threw in the towel almost immediately, and that collapsed the Super League idea within 48 hours.
yeah.
And you look 2 years on, and it's really only Real Madrid and Barcelona have not stood down from this project. Juventus only recently withdrawed. Other than that, most of them, being Real Madrid and Barcelona, are the main speculation for this Super League to occur again, which, like Jackson mentioned, is going to run into the same problems.
Yeah, this whole thing was founded on the idea of the best clubs playing every week. Well, as it looks at the moment, we're just going to get a lot of El Clasico and a lot of Real Madrid versus Benfica or PSV. Not exactly, the sort of giant game that gets the average casual to watch, but, let them give it a go.
That's it. Well, is it really, nowadays, can you really refer to it as like, I know you can refer to it as El Clasico, but like it's not the same El Clasico standard as it was, 10 years ago when we were when we were avidly watching all the time, Jackson, when you had the fierce rivalry between Barcelona and Real Madrid. You had that Real Madrid side with Ronaldo, you had it with Modric, Toni Kroos, Marcelo, who else was there? Sergio Ramos. And then you look at the Barcelona side. The Barcelona had Messi, had Suarez, had Neymar, had Iniesta, had Xavi. Like they both had good side. They both had killer players. And that was always a fierce rivalry, especially between Messi and Ronaldo. Now you look at the El Clasico nowadays, and I struggle to find those two players to compare to for each team. Like where are the two standout guys from Real Madrid or Barcelona that have that same passion, that same mentality, that same ability as what those two had, the fierce rivalry? I mean, it was supposed to be Haaland and Mbappe. The rumors going around Haaland going to Barcelona, Mbappe going to Real Madrid. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition. Haaland going to Manchester City and Mbappe staying at PSG. but it isn't really an El Clasico anymore. And then you look at it potentially being an El Clasico with your Girona. Like it's just utterly ridiculous to have a Super League.
Yeah. If you're relying on your only big match being a dulled down El Clasico, I don't think it's going to be it's not much of a super league, is it? But
No.
but even then, I mean, it's I just think of all the obstacles, and I think this thing probably has no legs to it. But even then, it does force UEFA to give more to the clubs in order to keep them a part of UEFA. So expect more changes to UEFA to try and keep the clubs happy. Because the other clubs will say, well, there's another competition I can join. They wouldn't actually do it because the obstacles are ridiculous, but UEFA will want to give the club something to keep them in the Champions League as opposed to the whatever new breakaway competition comes up.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, that might be the case, but this competition is dead in the water. And I read these, like they've changed up. Have you seen the new format? How they're like promoting it now? So because it's not like the old format with like the closed system, like 15 teams. It's like, oh, we're gonna have 64 teams
Yeah, no,
and
I
like
haven't
three
seen
leagues.
I haven't seen the new format. No.
Well, it's let's just say we'll put it simply, they don't have 64 teams willing to join. I can think of a couple Spanish teams like Marseille, the Dutch teams, the Turkish teams, and maybe Red Star Belgrade.
Yep.
I mean, okay, that's 10. Okay, where are the other 50 clubs? Where are they coming from?
Yeah, that's it.
It's this whole thing feels like, and they want to they want to start it next year. They've come in and said, we want to start this Super League in a year or two. They
It's
don't even have like 50 out of the 60 clubs
and
get like to have publicly stated support for it.
not just to mention the 64 men's teams, Jackson. They also want to have 32 women's teams.
Yeah, where does that even begin? I mean, I haven't looked into into whether any like Premier League women's teams have come out to support a Super League, but
I haven't seen anything about English women's team supporting the Super
yeah.
League. And
I will say one
I,
thing that could happen is the Saudi teams might join the men's. Do the Saudis have women's teams? Maybe that might.
I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure about that. I do hear a lot of stuff, and I am very connected with the women's league over in England, but
Yeah.
um, I haven't seen or heard anything about a Super League from any of those clubs there.
No. It did. I haven't heard any statements, and like, and I'm sure if a Super League starts up in a year or two, we're going to be watching Galatasaray, or we're going to be watching Feyenoord or Al Riyadh. We'll watch some of the Saudi clubs that want to join. Some of the Turkish clubs. Who else? Who else could we like? Like
We're gonna have you're gonna have
Dynamo?
Yeah, you're gonna have to start going to to make up those teams. You're gonna have to start going to like Norway and Sweden, stuff
Copenhagen?
like that. Yeah, you're gonna have to start pulling in teams from almost every country in Europe
And
to
at that
actually
point,
get
are you
those.
much of a Super League?
No, it's not really a super league at that point because then it begs the question of the quality of the games. Is it really that super?
Yeah,
Like
I mean, I remember when the initial came out.
the
The
initial,
initial policy was like being funded $3 billion by JP Morgan.
yeah, and
Are
the
they going to put forward that money to
and just
watch Galatasaray versus Copenhagen?
exactly. And just what you said before, the initial pitch of the Super League was to watch the best teams play day in, day out. It was supposed to be an El Clasico, the best rivalries here and there playing against each other. How are we going to have the best rivalries when we got like Dynamo playing Fenerbahce? Where's the rivalry there? Where's the passion? More importantly, where's the quality?
Where is
That's
it?
the thing.
Gosh, I mean, it's so it's so tricky. I mean, I'm just trying to think what the plan is. Like, because this is going to change football. Like it's threatening, it's claiming it's going to change football in such a fundamental way, where we could have, and it's even promising. It's promising to do things like offer like all the games for free streaming on like a advertised platform.
Yep, I've seen
Unity,
that as well.
it was called. Like this promising to be this huge, like game changing league. But behind all of the big media releases, the announcements and stuff like the free streaming, there's not a lot of substance.
Yep.
Like I'm trying to think even who else we would talk, because yeah, I think if PSG aren't, what are you going to grab Marseille and Lyon? Lyon are like in a relegation dogfight. Is that really like the best that you can get?
And then if they don't get Leon, who's their next target of Ligue 1? Like other
Nantes.
than Marseille, what they're gonna go to Monaco, are they? Like at some point they're just going to be realistic, and what they're trying to do here is they're just trying to create the Super League, the Europa League, and the Conference League in pretty much everyday competitions rather than their standalone competitions. If you think about it, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take away from UEFA and make it into their own, Super League, as they call it. It's supposed to be a long, all year round UEFA Champions League where everyone plays each other. We have these big matches, and then you go look at that second division that you were talking about is basically the Europa League, and then the third division, the Conference League. Like you can see how they're trying to correlate it to what UEFA has already.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So it's not even that it's special, really. I will say, I'll get you to do this. We've talked about some of the clubs that are probably going to join this thing just from a financial perspective and just because they got nothing better to do, really. But let's say, so we've got a couple of teams that have just come out and denied any interest in this.
Yep.
Being AC Milan, Bayern Munich, Atletico, PSG, the Premier League clubs.
Yep.
A22 they're a consulting firm. They're not completely stupid. They will be having conversations with teams to make this a Super League. Some of those teams who denied, if there was one team from the list of teams that have come out and said, we don't want anything to do with this, that was to try and change their position and join the league in when it starts, let's say after its first year, who would that club be?
That's a good question. Well, I don't want to really go towards the English clubs now that they've come out with their adjudicator and a few other points. So I want to try and steer away from the English clubs. I would say out of the teams that have taken the standpoint to say no, I'd say there'd be one of these two teams. It'd either be PSG or Atletico after the first year. Because if Atletico, if Barcelona and Real Madrid go, then Atletico's only real competition in the league right now is Girona, who are having a Leicester type of season. So I don't think that'll last forever there. So Atletico might be able to take out La Liga, but then after that, what's the point? What's the point of playing in La Liga and winning all the time when you've got two other teams that are based in Spain that are better than you, and they're playing in a Super League competition?
Well, it could be said that it also becomes an issue of finances. How much revenue does La Liga make without Barcelona and Real Madrid? And if you're Atletico Madrid and you have the option of joining the Super League, are you really going to hang back just so you can win a few more trophies?
That's the question. Yeah. That's
I
definitely.
get that. I mean, I'm actually going to go the opposite and go back to England. Yes, I agree. There's a regulator, there's the FA, there's the UK government, which will come out against it. I maintain, though, that the English clubs aren't done with this. I think that you look at someone like
Tottenham.
No, actually, I was actually going to go with Arsenal.
Okay, yeah, I can say that.
Arsenal being one of the biggest masterminds behind the original, and they aren't going to make as much money as some of these other teams. I think if anyone was to try and go for this again, because Kroenke and his lot are still there. So they could absolutely go for that again. I don't know if they'd be successful. No, I don't think they'd be successful, actually, I would go as far to say. But I don't think the English clubs are done with that. So I reckon someone in the English league might try and, especially after it's started, maybe after a year or two, like an Arsenal or something says, let's have another try at this, because maybe now that it's a thing, people won't be so against it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, because you got to think the Premier League is so fueled by endless amounts of money. It creates a kind of greed that these people at the top are absolutely going to say, oh, then we have an opportunity to make even more. Like, so I don't know. I think the incentives that are created by the Premier League being so rich actually make it one of the most likely leagues to see future rebels to the Super League. Whereas the Germans, for instance, with their rules, I don't expect Bayern Munich to ever change its mind.
No.
If the fans are truly against it, it's just not going to happen ever, because of the structure of how those clubs are owned and controlled.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Bayern Munich and the Bundesliga. English league, I'm not really too sold on the current point that you've made, but I can see the potential of it happening.
Yeah, and you've just got to think, it's hard. You can't see it now, but once this league's existed for a year or two, it becomes a different fight. Like, is there the same sort of outrage that forced the English clubs not to go forward with it? Because so much of the power to prevent them from doing it in the first place came from fans, players, coaches, came from individuals. And it came, and is the fan outrage the same once the competition already exists and is off the ground? I don't know. I mean, you think the role of English clubs in the beginning of European competitions in the 20th century, like, once it becomes an established thing, nobody is as against it anymore. So, I don't know. That's my take on that, at least. But no, I think we're probably need to put that one behind us, Matt, and move on to our next topic. Is there anything left you want to say on the Super League?
No, I just hope that it doesn't happen, because it'll ruin football. But we will see how it goes.
No, free streaming, man. Free
there.
streaming.
Well, the free streaming is probably the only benefit.
I'll chuck my Optus Sport and just watch the Galatasaray versus Marseille.
Let's be realistic. This streaming is really the only beneficial thing that's there. I mean, because if you're an avid football supporter like what me and Jackson are, you're watching Optus Sport, you're watching on Stan Sport for the Champions League. You got the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup, Paramount Plus, like
outrageous.
Yeah, right. That's already at least 3 streaming services you've got there as well. Like,
I do have Paramount Plus now, so
yes,
top content.
And then if you want to watch like anything else that's outside of those leagues, you probably have to get like KO Sport or something like that as well. So that's another one. So
yeah, exactly.
It's like the Italian league or the German league or the French league. It's all KO Sports, because Optus Sport only does the English league, men and women, the Japanese league, and the Liga. So
yeah, what a mess in this country of like what's broadcasting rights.
Yep.
Oh damn. Oh, well, we'll move on then from that, so that we've got time for our other 2 topics. So I think first of all, we're going to tackle. There's a couple teams that have been really putting in a surprise this season. Aston Villa is an obvious pick for that, but we're actually going to go the other way and leave Aston Villa for later in the season. We're going to talk about another club that is overperforming in a very big way, just at the other end of the table. We're going to be talking about Everton. So, Matt, I think what we'll lead with is Everton did have a already bad start to the season. I think they started off with like a 5-game winless run. They didn't win any games at first.
Yeah.
I don't remember them winning a game until Luton, maybe? No, I think they lost that one they lost against Luton as well. But they definitely lost the first 5.
Brentford.
And Brentford's their
3-1.
Their first one. So when they so having lost, first few games, they were already not in a great way. And then comes the hammer, the financial fair play hammer. So
That's
why don't you tell everyone about you give us a bit of information on this, Matt. What did this look like? And how does it affect a team like that when you get a points deduction? And not when it's like not a Man City, but it's an Everton. Like, how did that affect Everton, you reckon?
Oh well, it affected Everton in a great way. I'm just going to slightly deviate. I've just got a notification on my phone. Jadon Sancho to Borussia Dortmund deal is on for Borussia Dortmund loan.
Oh, back to
Manchester City.
Dortmund.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
He can travel later today for a medical.
Ugh.
So sorry, I just wanted to chuck that in there because
No, fair enough.
yeah. But essentially, Everton were in a they were in the mid-table spot were before the deduction happened. So they were around, that 10th to 14th placing. They've got a 10-point reduction for being, I think it was $20 million over their financial fair play. So from that, it's dropped them down into the relegation zone. So it's boosted Luton up out of the relegation zone, and they've sat right at 17th. Everton since then have been clawing their way back, and by clawing their way back, this was happened at the start of December. So end of November, they'd lost to Manchester United 3-0. Their previous game before that, they'd won Crystal Palace tightly 3-2. But it'd been draws and losses mostly before that. A couple wins here and there that had put them in that mid-table position. As soon as they had this points deduction on them and they were in that bottom relegation zone, they turned into, prime tiki-taka Barcelona, like 1-0 against Everton.
Well, hang on.
Hold on.
Tiki taka football. Do you know
Hold
who
on.
the manager is?
Yeah,
Tiki taka football.
yeah. It's not really tiki-taka football, but you get my point. All right, Sean Dyche, Brexit football, 2 studs up.
Tiki taka
All that.
football,
Anyway, so start of December, 1-0 against Nottingham Forest. Not bad, right? Then they move into the 8th of December against Newcastle. You're expecting Newcastle to wallop Everton here. 3-0 to Everton. Move to the 11th of December, 2-0 against Chelsea. 17th, 2-0 against Burnley. They lost narrowly 2-1 against Tottenham. Lost against Man City as well. Then round out December, they lost to the Wolves, which currently, after a few other games here and there, is put them still at 17th in the Premier League. So they're just outside the relegation zone at the moment.
Oh.
Although you add those 10 points on, the 10 points that had been deducted from them, and where would they be, Jackson? They're on currently 16.
They'd be something like we're at 16th.
They're on 16 points at the moment. They're in 17th.
So they'd be 26 points.
Yep.
So they'd be something like
26 points would slot them right into 12th place.
Yeah.
Just between Wolves are on 28 and Bournemouth are on 25.
But the stats would back up. That's probably where they should be. I mean, think they've got a goal difference comparable to Man United. Yeah, they've got they've got no possession, but they've got great numbers of tackles. So they rank top for tackles per game actually.
Yep. So
at 20.5 tackles per game, they actually rank the top 4 tackles in the whole league. And so it's actually, and not to like their stats is like the number of counter attacks they're doing, the number of goals compared to like conceded. So they're like 9th on goals conceded, or maybe like 10th now. So they're like really doing well.
Yeah, 24.
Think about it.
24 goals for, 28 goals against. So they got a -4 goal difference at the moment. And look, like I was saying before, obviously not to, they're not playing a tiki-taka style or for a bit of a laugh from what I was saying before, but they're playing considerably better after they've got this points deduction. And it's noticeable. I mean,
you compare, think about that -4. Jesus, that's like the teams under them have like -15, -20, like goal difference. I think it's like
Luton's got -14, Burnley, who are in second to last, -21, and Sheffield with the worst goal difference in the league, -34.
Oof.
and they're hanging in Everton with a -4. And there's even teams above them like Nottingham Forest who are on a -10, -11 goal difference.
God, my gosh, just shows you that they don't belong there. They do not belong down there, and I think that's credit to Sean Dyche.
Yep.
Tiki taka football, as you said.
Oh, it's just a bit of a laugh, Jackson. We all know what Sean Dyche likes to play.
Oh, Sean Dyche.
Look,
He's
he's
the man.
actually been experimenting with these lineups recently, which
Yeah.
is very interesting to me because we don't really see. Well, we never really saw Sean Dyche at any of his old clubs go away from the typical 4-2-2. But
Mm.
you see in some of his other games that he's been playing, and I'll see if I can pull up a lineup right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
but his other formations that he runs is like not exactly like a 4-4-1-1.
yeah,
Oh,
well, he's got this
ever
one.
it's crazy.
When they won 2-0 against Burnley, 17th of December, he's playing a 5-4-1. I do remember there was a game earlier in December where he did play, where he moved to more of a, I guess you'd call it, a modern formation with some wing backs, very different to his normal 4-4-2 style. But you can see that he's definitely moved away from some of those older formations that he's used to, I
Yeah.
guess, a more modern
But
way.
even then, like think the draw with Crystal Palace.
Yep.
That was like more of a 4-2-3-1. Like,
Yep.
yeah, I feel
Correct.
like I agree. It's definitely experimentation from a Sean Dyche perspective, but at the end of the day, it's the same defensive energy. Like it's like conceding no chances. It's massively reducing the number of goals conceded. It's archetypal Sean Dyche. It's exactly what he do, and he's going into a team where he's actually reuniting with a few players.
That's correct.
Like you're talking about, like James Tarkovsky in the back there,
Yep.
who, I mean, far out. That's Sean Dyche's man in the back line. It was at Burnley. It is here. It's like you're talking about McNeil,
Dwight McNeil.
who
Yep.
who is, and McNeil's tricky because he is an incredibly talented player on the ball, and yet as a winger, he's playing in a Sean Dyche defensive lineup. And yet somehow it comes together, and he can get that out of McNeil and make it work for a defensive team. But despite the fact that I've been waiting every season for McNeil to make the switch to a bigger team where he's not actually expected to contribute to defense. And yet we had a conversation about this, I think it was us, where we discussed the fact that it was McNeil who's actually contributing to defense.
Yes, no, it was us having this conversation.
That's a Sean Dyche miracle. The fact he can get that out of a player like McNeil and allow every player to contribute to the defense like that. And I mean, it's not just what he does with like McNeil, it's also what he does with Mikolenko,
Yep.
who's come into that team, and he started on the bench, but he's coming out and he's scoring goals. It's not just that he's like a defensive hallmark, which he's also doing, but it's actually he's contributing those few goals that allow Sean Dyche to win those key games. So I think it's like, because I mean they don't score a lot of goals. Even with a good goal difference, they don't score a lot of goals. But just with his few goals, I think he's third behind Calvert-Lewin and Decore.
Yep.
I only think those two have only scored more goals than their fullback.
He's got
And that's
he's only got 2 goals this season, Mikolenko. And
yeah,
if what you're saying is right, that it really reflects poorly on their finishing.
it does. But if you're not conceding a lot of goals, if you're winning goals by one, like winning a game by 1 goal,
1-0 or something like that, yeah.
and you're able to train your fullback not just to keep the line strong, but also to contribute those game-winning goals. I mean, that's what makes the difference between a relegated and a not relegated side.
Exactly.
So I think he's like he was, I think his goals were against Brighton and Crystal Palace this season, but like it's, and especially it's his, not just those goals, but it's also how he's combining with other players. It's how he's combining with like McNeil, for instance, and those two are working together both to when they're going back and they're defending at the same time, but they're actually going forward and then linking up in attack, where Mikolenko actually comes in the center while McNeil stays out wide. It's
actually Mikolenko is actually on the opposite side to.
Yeah, no, he's on the opposite side. So what's happening is McNeil goes wide and he roams a little bit, but he's out on wide on the left hand. So what actually happens is Mikolenko comes in center and acts as another man in the center on the attack, which allows McNeil to stay out wide.
Yep.
And receive. It's usually, it's not a combination that people often think about. You usually think more about how does your right winger pair up with your right fullback. Right. And that's where some, like you mentioned, the wing backs, that's where it gets a little tricky because McNeil plays as their wing back when Sean Dyche plays that position, doesn't he?
Yep. On
Yeah.
side,
so even then, it would be they're playing fullbacks together, which and that's another relationship because depending on the team you have, you do rely sometimes on those huge diagonal passes between fullbacks to switch up the play.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Also not a McNeil strength though, so it's not an option there. But yeah, it's the way that they contribute to each other's positioning and allow each other to play really well. So, and it's also the fact that a couple times McNeil's actually played, as I said, in other positions because he's still developing. So he's actually not just playing on the right wing. So, but yeah, it's absolutely, it's the fact that, as you said, not a lot of goals, but at a place like Everton under Sean Dyche, you just need to be able to train your players to come up with goals from anywhere because one goal wins a game if you don't concede.
And just touching back on the goal scoring rankings for Everton, you got Decore first for the season so far, 6 goals, Calvert-Lewin 3, and then you've got a 3-way tie between Jack Harrison, Mikolenko, and Dwight McNeil on 2 goals each.
Yeah, there you go. It's and at West Ham this has happened as well. West Ham actually had a long time. We had no one goal scorer. For a very long time, we held the record. We would be the top team for the number of goal scorers, like goals spread out amongst people. But when you're struggling and you're able to produce a goal out of a diversity of players, like a number of different players, it does have its advantages. Yes, you don't have that clinical goal scorer who's going to put 20 away. And that's probably what you need if you're going to try and get European football. But if you're in a relegation dogfight, you don't want to be marked out of a game because they can go for your main like target man. Somewhere like Burnley, you don't know where the goals. Somewhere like Everton, I keep calling it's like Burnley all over again. You just don't know where the goals are going to come from.
That's it. And
so,
you also got, just touching back on Sean Dyche and his defensive presence and energy. You got James Tarkowski leading the league currently with blocks, 29 blocks.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
far.
He's a great, I would have loved him at West Ham, but he's doing bits at Everton. And you know, this is such a change. I mean, I'm thinking back to the Ancelotti days. This is such a change. Everton is so confusing. Like, it was only a few years ago we were talking about a team with like James Rodriguez. Like that was like their star player.
That's it.
And now we've gone from the likes of James Rodriguez to James Tarkowski.
That's it. And
it's like
you've also got 2 players from Everton in the top 10 for headed clearances. Jared Branthwaite, who seems to be a promising young defender as well, with 44 headed clearance, and James Tarkowski with 42 headed clearance.
Yeah.
So you really can see that both of those 2 are their starting centre backs as well. So you can see the centre backs pairing working together, bringing that energy.
And with ability in the air like that, as Sean Dyche develops this team, just wait and see. Wait to see those set piece goals roll in a bit more as well. Like it's coming. This is a team in development still. I really don't think they're going to be relegated. I can't say that 100% because, but at the end of the day, if their form stays consistent compared to like the other teams they're fighting against, your Brentford, your Luton, your Burnley, they are going to get to like 14th or 13th eventually. Just because their form is better over time, they're going to get there. Like they've got 2 wins in 5. If they keep doing that, they're going to be fine.
Well,
because that's still better than all of the other teams they're fighting against in relegation.
Yes, they've got Brentford in their sights at the moment. Brentford have a game in hand still. They're a win above Everton, so they've got 3 points ahead of them. Everton close that gap. They've still got a better goal difference than Brentford. If they can close that gap from a loss from Brentford or a couple losses and Everton gets a win, then they chase down Forest, who are only 1 point ahead of Brentford, and they're already up at that 15th, 14th spot then. Right,
Yeah.
They're already starting to climb the ladder. They just need a couple favourable results for them, and a few dubs in their tank, and then they're off to the middle of the pack. Really,
Yeah. No, exactly. It's and I think that's why, because of the points deduction, we can't look at where they are. We have to look at the more detailed data, which just suggests that by the end of the season they're going to be fine. Like that points deduction put them behind, but they've already made up for it massively, like compensated for it. And if they keep doing that, they're just going to their form is top table. So, well, not mid table. Their form is mid table.
I was about
So
to say
they're going to
top
be
table,
fine.
bit of a
Top
shout.
table.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, some pretty bang average teams in the top of the table. I'm just saying.
Yeah, Manchester United,
That wasn't the way I was going to
West
go.
Ham.
I was more going to go. Well, I can't say Chelsea because they're not even in the top of the table.
They're 10th.
You're reaching, aren't you? I think that's a bit of a reach.
All I'm going to say is we've had a couple unfavorable losses, and some unlucky losses from some stupid mistakes from players. That would have put us above West Ham in that 5th to 6th spot if we didn't have those. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to point any singular players out. Conor Gallagher against Arsenal. But we can swiftly move on from that.
No, we'll be back there in a sec. Don't you worry
Which
about
will,
that.
it'll bring up our topic for the round out of this this podcast in a minute or two.
But before we head there, I think I just want to I feel it's for this Everton, just to finish it up and give our final thoughts on this. I think if we're going to we're talking about, where they're going, we're saying they're going to be fine with regulation. But I think I want to get a grade about, in terms of, do you think they will, in the long term, Sean Dyche will be their choice? If they don't get relegated, Sean Dyche keeps them up. Do they actually keep him?
That's
And I only say this because these Everton owners have been known to be incredibly ambitious. So think like Sam Allardyce. When Sam Allardyce went to Everton a while back now, several years ago, he saved them from relegation, 2017-18.
Yep.
He saved them from relegation, pulled them all the way up to 9th, and then he was immediately sacked. He was immediately sacked because his football wasn't entertaining enough, and because while the owners thought he would be able to keep them out of relegation, they were looking higher. They wanted to take Everton to Everton, and that's why managers such as Carlo Ancelotti came in. So my question is then to you, Matt, do you think, how high does Sean Dyche have to get Everton for these owners to be convinced this time around that they should stick with a mid-table manager and just develop, as opposed to going for some fancy top club manager who's out of a job?
Well, I think at the moment their current conditions sort of inhibit them from getting another manager in, because obviously some other managers have different opinions of different players and have players that they like to play, styles that they like to play as well, which some players might not fit. And according to this financial fair play breach that Everton have had and their points deduction, it's probably not the best position for them to be bringing a new manager in, someone who deviates from Sean Dyche's current game plan and strategy too much. So
Mm.
I think that Sean Dyche will stay for the foreseeable future. I can't say for how long, but at least for next season, I'd say.
Hmm.
Sean Dyche, I think, needs to just get them to where they were projected to get this year before the points deduction. Needs to get them around that 10th spot, pushing the top of the ladder. And I think the manager, the owners of the team should be quite content with that, because if they're pushing that top of the ladder, they also can eventually push for that Conference League spot in maybe 2 years' time. It won't happen next season, but if they can stay up there in that 10th, 11th, 9th spot, potentially try and solidify that the next year or 2 years, I think that'd be a good outcome for Everton.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's the rational approach. I think that would be the approach that makes sense.
Yep.
And I think it would be best for Everton to do that. All right. Okay. Well, let's move on then to our final topic, which Matt alluded to a little bit. So Matt, I don't know how to put this delicately. Not having a great season, are you?
We're having a shit season.
Oh, would you use that such strong language? Yeah, I think you would use that strong language. You
Jackson,
guys are terrible.
Jackson, I'm not going to beat around the bush. All right, I know Chelsea have not been performing this season.
Mm.
I'm big enough man to admit it that they are shocking, especially looking at their loss this morning to Middlesbrough.
Mm.
Was atrocious.
Have you got any information on the game for us, Matt? I'd be interested to know anything about any stats from it, possession
Okay.
stats or
I can
shots.
I can pull up some shots and possession stats for you while I give a brief overview. I've just seen some of the most shocking performance from Chelsea that I've seen all season long, right? And if you can watch this game as a not just a Chelsea fan, if you can watch this game as a football fan and say what Maurizio Pochettino said in the after game press conference, then you need to take a very hard look in the mirror at yourself. He said, here's the stats: 18 shots to Middlesbrough 6, 5 on target to Middlesbrough 2, and 72% possession to Chelsea. Right? He said the team played well. That's what he said. On a 1 loss, the team played well. Maurizio Pochettino said that after the game in the post-game conference that they played well, right?
You know your standards are falling.
Our standards are definitely falling. Now, I'll just give you a brief overview, right? First 30 seconds into the game, Levi Colwill goes for a header to head the ball back to Petrovic. He's fluffed the header completely and put one of Middlesbrough strikers, I think it was Latte Laff, in on goal almost immediately. Luckily, Disassi came through and managed to stop any potential of a goal. But already 30 seconds to a minute into the game, we already have their first chance at goal for Middlesbrough. And it got worse and worse from there. Like, I'm not going to credit Disassi for that for the rest of the game, because there was some shocking moments from him as well. 54th minute, he was about 35 yards out from goal, 35, 36 yards. He decided to channel his inner Tony Rudiger and decided to shoot from that far out. He's absolutely belted in the row Z of the stands. Like, it's ridiculous. Thinking that he had any plausible talent like what Tony Rudiger had to actually take that shot was wild, considering he had 4 Chelsea players in front of him as well to get the ball out, to release the ball, to give it to someone to set up a actual play. He decided to take a shot from long distance, right? You look at our midfield, right? Midfield was okay. Enzo Fernandez is probably a standout in the midfield. Madueke didn't really have, the game transition into the stats that he had. He was actually putting energy into the game. He was trying to push forward. He's trying to beat players and stuff. I'm not saying that he had a great performance, but he was actually showing like he cared, which was better than most of the players that were there. And Madueke actually got subbed off as well. Him and Enzo Fernandez, 2 of the 3 players that got subbed off, and those 2 players probably had the most energy on the team. other than that, it was really unlucky from Cole Palmer. He should have had at least 3 goals in the first half, and I'm not joking. He should have at least had 3 goals in the first half. One of them was just the ball come off the keeper's save awkwardly. It was Tom Glover who used to play for Melbourne City, actually, who was keeper Middlesbrough. It was a regular goalkeeper catch. He's fumbled it going forward, and Cole Palmer just couldn't control it with his left foot to put it into the net. And there was a few other ones that Cole Palmer had that game. He should have at least had 2 or 3 goals where he could have single-handedly won the game for us. But, sometimes the luck just doesn't fall that day. And Cole Palmer, he's had an exceptional season for us in terms of the standard of players this season, not the standard that Chelsea would like, but the standard of players this season. Cole Palmer's had an exceptional season, and you can't really fault him for trying to score and getting out there. But some of the other team members today, it was really just shocking. It was shocking. I got no words. Like the goal that was scored by Middlesbrough, Hackney, he was about on the halfway line. They've played a ball off to Isaiah Jones, and he's got some pace. He's burnt Colwill down the wing. Colwill's kept up with him. He's got some skills, Isaiah Jones, and just put Colwill in a little bit of a blender, put a nice pass through, and Hackney's just come to the box to finish it. But if you look at Hackney's run, Caicedo's marking him from the halfway line, and he drops off just as Hackney enters the box. And the ball comes perfectly into Hackney's feet, and Hackney just buries it into the far corner past Petrovic. Typical sweaty goal that could have been avoided if Caicedo actually tracked his man completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Rather than deciding to just leave it to the back. I mean, I didn't watch the game. I can only give my assessments at the macro level. So, Chelsea is scoring a reasonable amount of goals. At the end of the day, they're doing better than they'd be about 8th, 7th for number of goals scored, I reckon, would be about right. But it's on the goals conceded side.
Yeah.
And I think this points to where the problem is, because Everton, who we just talked about, with Sean Dyche at the helm, have conceded 3 less goals than Chelsea. Just 3, and it's a difference between 17th and 10th.
Yep.
The number of goals they've conceded is not up to standard, and there's only one team above them that's conceded more, and that's Brighton. The difference is Brighton have scored a few goals more than Chelsea, but the rest of those teams have a better defense than Chelsea. And I think, and I can think about, and I know this probably doesn't help with your mental health, Matt, but I want you to think back at a time when you had Rudiger and Thiago Silva as your centre-back pairing. Yeah. I want you to think about how much of a monster Rudiger was. I saw that man destroy people, tear them down.
I was having a conversation exactly like this. I was talking to another Chelsea supporter as well, and we were both saying that we thought, when Chelsea signed Badiashile this year, he sort of had the makings of a Tony Rudiger replacement and everything like that. The first couple of games, he looked all right and everything like that, and now he's just terrible. Honestly, just terrible. I don't even think we're going to find a Rudiger replacement in the near future, because Rudiger, honestly, he had that passion, he had that drive, and he also had the.
It's all about hunger. It's about power. What's the song?
That's it.
It's about drive. It's about power. We stay hungry.
Yeah, we devour. Yeah, the Rock.
Yeah.
He rumor has it he was actually describing
Rudiger.
Yeah, I know Rudiger had the passion, and he had the pride to play for his club and to play for the badge that was on his chest. You saw, especially in those games against Tottenham, the real feisty games, he was there. He was standing. He was not just performing to help out his team. He contributed to a few goals, a few defensive stops there that helped Chelsea win those games that we had against Tottenham. And he also backed up his team when there was a fight between a few players. He ran the whole length of the pitch. He was on the other side of the pitch and ran the whole length of the pitch to stand up for his team. Like, that's the drive, that's the aggression, that's also the tactical awareness that he has on the pitch as well, and
Yeah,
the ability to perform. But now that
yeah.
Rudiger's gone, our defensive line is currently held up by a 39-year-old Thiago Silva, who, when he's out of form, we don't really have another defender.
No one.
But
I mean, it's so weird. For years, we've talked about Chelsea's inability to, complete their attack by getting an actually good striker, or a striker that fits into their team. I mean, far out, some names flash by: Lukaku,
Lukaku,
Timo Werner,
Timo Werner, Kai
Morata.
Havertz, Morata. I can keep naming if you want me to.
And now it's
Higuain
just
for a bit.
weird. Higuain as well. I mean, it's weird just because we've been talking about that for so long, and now it's Chelsea's defense that is holding them back.
Yeah,
Which is why what we actually wanted to talk about in this podcast was, how should Chelsea be tackling the January window? Who should they be like dropping? Who should they be getting? Matt's definitely got a better grasp of this than me, but my immediate observation is that if the defense is the problem, January is the time to get a reinforcement. Maybe not somebody who's necessarily going to be a world beater, because you don't usually get them in January, but someone who offers just a bit more depth and can maybe develop into that role.
yeah.
And I think for me, you've got to be looking at someone who can play a bit of variety in the back, different positions. They can play centre back, they can play full back on either side. So having that to heart, my recommendation is that Chelsea sign Oscar Mingueza.
Yep.
So he's the defender at Celta Vigo. He's having a great season. His stats speak for themselves. They actually put him as one of the best right backs in the league. So he's getting something like 93 kilometers in progressive carrying distance. He's getting one successful take on a game. He's even got a few crosses going in. Like, he's actually got comparable crosses to Jan Kuto, who is actually the fullback who's being considered by Man City. I might have said that Jan Kuto should be someone Chelsea should look at, but I think after his loan with Manchester City, that's probably where he's more going to end up. He's probably not going to be interested in going to a Chelsea. So I think, at least for January and maybe into the future, expectations mean that Oscar's probably a better fit for Chelsea. You got to welcome to this is what it's like to be a mid-table club. You just have to lower your expectations. So with that in mind, he's even putting in a few assists. Expected assisted goals are nice. Shot creating actions are pretty good. He's got it all. For the defender, he's also contributing to the attack, which isn't bad. It's a good thing to see. Although he's still more of a defensive player than some of these other fullbacks who like to run forward on the ball. So comparably, as Pilaqueta in La Liga is not quite, but maybe 2/3 of the progressive carrying distance of Oscar. So with that in mind, what we're talking about, to sum up for those who just want to get to the end of the stats and want a summary, is we're talking about a versatile defender who can play fullback and can play centre back, and is also very forward thinking, but not too much that he's going to leave the back line defenseless. He's going to be out of position, so he's still going to be contributing. So basically, my thought on this player was that, hey, you want to fill in depth at all positions, you've got your guy, but you've also got a player who can come in and replace any one of your back line. I think that anyone in that back line, whether we're talking about Disasi, Gusto, Colwill, none of them are guaranteed to be long-term starters for Chelsea.
Mm-hmm.
They're all really finding their way still. And I think that even once players like Cucurella and Chilwell come in, I think there's a good chance you're not just getting a player for depth, but also a player who can be there for a while and actually settle into the starting lineup. He's being talked about. The fact is that other clubs are sniffing around Oscar. So he's only been there a few years, but he's actually being pursued in January by West Ham at the sum of only about 20 million. Those are the sort of numbers that are being thrown around. So it's not like this is unaffordable for Chelsea. This is absolutely, I mean, considering how much money they spent in the summer, 20 million for a pretty good defender
Yep.
sounds like a good deal for Chelsea. I mean, would you agree with that? Considering all I've said, Matt, would you say this is a player that Chelsea could use?
I would say so, yes. I one of my potential defenders I have is it's a very very similar defender to you, versatile defender, can play a few different positions in the back line, and it was a cheap like option for the team, only 30 million euros. But I looking at some of his stats, the defender that I've got, it was Nico Elverti. He is in some of the higher percentiles for aerial duels won, dribbles passed, clearances, shot blocks, penalties given away, interceptions. But he does lack a little bit in the goals conceded, some ground duels won, and some tackles as well. So I can't really attest to some of his assists or anything like that. So I would
Mm,
say currently just looking on that, he's got expected assist. He's in a decent level of expected assist. He's got a few very high cross completion rate,
mhm,
very high pass completions, which that's pretty standard for a centre back to have, um, playing the way that centre backs do at the moment. But I would
mhm,
say, judging between the two that we have, that Oscar would be a better pick for the Chelsea team. Um,
mhm,
I want to bring up one defender though, um, to bring forward to you. I did have two. I had three defenders. So I had Nico Alverti from Borussia Mönchengladbach, who I just mentioned. I had down Maddie Cash from Aston Villa. Although I've got two, a positive and a negative for it. Injuries to Reece James. It's going to force Chelsea to sign and you right back this January transfer window, or someone who
yeah.
can play a versatile position. Um, Matty Cash is impressed with Aston Villa so far this season. Although
Mm,
the negative to this is the way that Aston Villa's success have had this season is going to be prove very difficult for Cash to actually have a move to Chelsea.
yeah, in
Aston,
January as
Aston Villa
well.
wouldn't really want to give Matty Cash up in January
Ah,
now that they're second or third on the ladder. So the other player that I was looking at, potential defender, this is more of a depth for centre back, rather than a versatile player who can play two different positions. Jonathan Tah from Bayer Leverkusen. Now we look at our centre back list, right? The depth chart of the centre back has a few cracks in it.
mm,
Fafana, long term injury problems. Thiago Silva, his form and his future at the club. We've got Badia Shield, Desassi, and Colwill, who play. Colwill plays currently left back at the moment because of our injuries at
mhm,
left back to Ben Chilwell and Marco Corral.
yeah.
We also have Trevor Chalobah, who's expected to leave the club in this transfer window to go to Crystal Palace. So, what could Jonathan Tah bring to the team? He brings leadership, brings consistency and experience that Chelsea lack without an informed Thiago Silva, right? He has this, and
Mm,
another positive benefit for Jonathan Tah is Bayer Leverkusen has a small release clause for him. It's only 18 million euros, right? But the negative to having Jonathan Tah or to signing Jonathan Tah is, will he leave? It's the same thing as Matty Cash. Will he
mm,
leave mid-season from a high-flying Bayer Leverkusen team after many years of loyal service to their team?
mm,
And you look at
yeah.
him in the Bundesliga, his stats, he's in the 90th percentile for goals conceded, for clean sheets, for passes recorded. Um, he's got He's got some he's got some good stats for XG. He's in the high percentiles for XG. His successful pass completion rate's pretty high. His assist is average. Expected assist per minutes is 0.16. So he's in the
Mm,
60th percentile in the Bundesliga for that.
mm,
Um, he's got some good dribble dispositions. He's in a high percentile from that. Although it is the question of will he leave Bayer Leverkusen after they've been high
mm.
flying mid-season, which is
He's
another,
yeah.
yeah, that is the problem with Jonathan Tah. Although he has a lot of positives, it's that could be holding him back.
Mm,
because, like I mentioned before, he does have the leadership, does have consistency, he does have experience that Chelsea lack when we don't have Thiago Silva in the team or Thiago Silva's fallen out of form. We see that a lot of our goals leak from poor defense. And it's not just the wing backs, because the wing backs now, we see Colwell play at the wing back. We also have Malo Gusto, who's starting to show some glimpses of being a good wing back. We have a young player in Alfie Gilchrist who's come on a few times and put on a good shift in the defensive line. Although it is that second centre back that pairs with Thiago Silva that we still are tossing and turning between who's that going to be. Some weeks is Disassi, some weeks we have Badiashile, some weeks there's other misses and matches in there. And it's also depending on injuries and other things. The other question that you have to ask is, how long is Thiago Silva going to be at the club?
yeah, exactly. And I mean, not for long, a year or two, really. I can't see him staying any longer than that. And once he's gone, but yeah, that's still plenty of time. Even if he stays for a year or two, it's still enough time to get someone. And I mean, and that's why with Tar, especially, he's a great option. I really rate him. He's actually a favorite of mine on Football Manager, but he's someone you're more likely to get in the summer.
That's correct.
I still feel he's probably out of reach in January.
Yeah.
And I'm going to back that up. I don't think there's any rumors of him moving in January.
No, there's not.
Whereas Oscar, there are rumors about. It's not like he isn't feasible for January. It seems that that is something at least that is being claimed that he's interested in and teams are interested in. But I think you're right. I think the names you've mentioned, and I think Tar's number one for me.
Yeah, definitely. Tar's definitely
He's a great fit if you want to rebuild that defense, because none of these players, and you can try and make it work however you want, but no one in that back line convinces me. Whether it's Disassi or Badiashile, neither are going to become household names at Chelsea.
Oh no, definitely not.
Yeah. So that's my thought on that. But yeah, I definitely think if you're in a few years, if Chelsea are looking at a back line that's Tar, Mingueza, and a return from injury Reese with
Ben Chilwell.
Yeah, if that's your first preference over Cucurella, I think either's fine.
I'd take Ben Chilwell over Cucurella.
Ben Chilwell, Tar, Mingueza, Reese. That's an incredible back line. You fix the goalkeeper, and that back line will not concede goals.
No.
And I think you can start putting that together in January by getting Mingueza.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree.
But no, I agree. I think it's a good name to bring up though, Tar. He's definitely someone Chelsea should be looking at. But we won't linger on that too much longer. We're running out of time, but let's run us. So Matt, you've put a lot of thought into this one on the January strategy. So tell you what, give me 3 names of people who should go, 3 names of people who should be brought in, the 3 top players for other positions.
Okay.
That we should focus on.
People to go. Chalobah, mentioned it before.
Yep.
In Madison, Matson has actually just recently, a couple of hours ago, signed a new deal for Chelsea to 2027. 2-year extension to his original deal with a release clause for summer 2024. Although he will fly to Borussia Dortmund tomorrow for a loan as well. So we'll see Matson join Jadon Sancho on loan for Borussia Dortmund. That's already one person out, one person expected to be out.
Yeah.
Now we look at Matos. He's gone on loan to Huddersfield Town already. They've sent him out. They're just really these players that haven't really got broken into the first team yet.
So you'd say those are good moves as things stand.
Currently, I'd say they're good moves as they stand, because we really got no need for these players, and I do see Matson
been playing in the part recently.
He has started, but the thing is with Matson, it's not that we don't have a need for him in particular. It's the fact that he doesn't really fit that much, or like Pochettino doesn't really favor him over other players that much. So it's sort of at the club, he's getting annoyed because he's not playing as much as what he thought he was going to play.
Yeah.
That's the main thing for his move to Dortmund, his loan to Dortmund. I've also seen some potential rumors of a loan for Madueke going around
Mm.
because Madueke was a signing pushed very hard by Graham Potter when he was at the club.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if he's someone that Pochettino wanted to keep in the team, or although his last few outings as a Chelsea player has shown his drive, his aggression to play. It's just he's
You
someone.
don't want to clear out those Graham Potter
No.
players too quickly, though. I mean, you've got like Caicedo, who's also a player from Graham Potter era, like Graham Potter era.
Mhm. Yeah, you
So
don't. I'm not saying to clear out all the players that we have, but there's definitely some players that are there that we know we're not going to play that can be moved to free up some more money for other players to sign in, or to free up some more bench spots for other players that we do have that are also not there. I do think Wesley Fofana has to go.
oh, that's in. Would you, when you say that, you're talking about January? You reckon they should get him off the books as soon as possible?
Yep. I think they should get him off the books as soon as possible because they signed him knowing that he was injured right up until when they signed him. He signed for the club. I think he was healthy for about a week, and then he got injured again. He's been I don't know how many games he's played for Chelsea off the top of my head, but I don't even think it's in double digits. I wouldn't even say that it's greater than 5 games that Fofana's played for the club.
Now
We've
that's
spent
crazy.
we've spent quite a few $1 million on Fofana for him to be on our injury list for the pretty much the whole time he's been at the club. Now, I think that is a favourable thing to happen. Get Fofana off the books. There are some players like I mentioned, Fofana, Trevor Chalobah. Even though I rate Trevor Chalobah, he was a good up and coming player. There's some players that we just got to get off the books, and the sooner we can do it, the better.
Yep.
So those are some of the players that I would see leaving potentially in January, which would help. In my viewpoint, some players to bring in. I'll give you a quick overview. Like you said, we're really looking for a right back, a defender, someone who can defend your centre back, right back, play a few different positions in this transfer window. We also, in my opinion, we need a striker. We need someone that can bring a bit of pizzazz to the attack, right? I've had a few names written down. You can see some of the rumors. Victor Osimhen from Napoli, that he's been rumored to come around.
That's a big one for January, though.
It is,
It's
but it
huge.
won't. I'm just saying these are some rumors. These aren't necessarily what could happen in January. There's been also rumors about Ivan Toney, but I think there is one player that Chelsea could take a chance on in the January transfer window. The only problem is his league that he plays in. So this player is Santiago Gimenez from Feyenoord in the Dutch league. So the positives for Santiago so far is this season he's scored 20 goals from 22 games. He's a very cheap striker in terms of some of the other strikers that have been rumored to come to the club, between 35 to 60 million euros. Although the negative, or the one stipulation I have of Santiago Jimenez is it's hit or miss. It's a real gamble to sign players from this Dutch league. And my question is this calculated risk that's worth taking, Jackson?
I think it's right to be concerned, because even from a relatively good league, the stats don't necessarily transfer. So, and I'm thinking back a while ago, we actually signed a striker from the Dutch league. Similar stats, about 25 goals a season. I think his name was, he's gone now, long gone now. He was rubbish. Abedi? He barely remember his name because he barely ever played. He was just not cut out for this league. So I think that if you want to go this way, like as a manager, if like Mauricio Pochettino was looking at this player and going, I like the way he plays, he better be doing it that off his play style as opposed to his actual stats, like number of goals. Because a lot of subpar players can score a lot of goals in those leagues.
That's correct.
So it's like, I think it's a good January. It fits a January transfer window though.
Mhm.
It's the kind of signing you can get in January to sort of boost up the forward line if you know you didn't want to rely on Jackson, for instance.
Yep.
But I think for the long term, like, and that's where I think someone like Oscar is good for Chelsea's backline because not only is he going to bring depth, but he's potentially a starter for the next few years. He can really force his way into the starting lineup.
Yep. So,
do you think Gimenez could do that really over the few years? Like, do you see him as the sort of player who can become a starter?
This is the calculated risk. So this is, can I see him becoming a starter? It's a bit, up in the air, depending on some of the play styles that we like to play and some of the players that we currently have to fill the attacking positions. Looking at Gimenez, it is a calculated risk, but you need to look at players. And this is what is encompassed in the risk is you need to look at players that can come into a Chelsea team and make an impact now. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for, we're not looking for the same thing that we looked at in Mudryk, in a few of our other young players that we've signed young players to develop for 3, 4, 5 years time. We're not looking for that. We need people who can impact the game now. And that's the thing is, I'm not too sure how Gimenez will go in the Premier League. That's why I've said, is this a calculated risk that's worth taking?
And I think I'd say your striker pick is probably comparable to mine, if not slightly better. Like, I think you are at least. I think it's a good point to say that Chelsea should be looking for someone, especially in January, who's going to have an immediate effect on this current season, especially in a season when you're hoping desperately that that impact gives you European football. I went a little bit of a different direction with my recommendation. Someone who's very young, but someone who can develop into a very talented player under the right coach and in the right system. So I'm talking about Benjamin Sesko, who for this January window is getting transfer attention from teams like Man United and Arsenal. He's being billed as the next Erling Haaland. I think in the long term, he's an incredible fit to put behind Nicholas Jackson. Absolutely. I don't think you can do any better. I think you'd get him it would cost a pretty penny.
Yep.
But I get the sense that he is available in January and he's interested in moving in January. But would he provide an immediate impact to this season? No.
Yes, he definitely won't provide an immediate impact to the season, but Sesko, like you said, he's one of Europe's brightest stars. He's been linked to Chelsea actually for a couple of years now, and will fit the strategy and playing style that Chelsea do play.
Yeah.
The only concern I do have for him at the moment, other than the fact that he won't have an immediate impact, is that in his first season, RB Leipzig, he's only scored 3 goals.
Yeah. And as I said, that's why I wouldn't expect an immediate impact.
Yes.
He hasn't had heaps of appearances for RB Leipzig, to be fair. He's only had 13. But
as a striker, you kind of expect a little bit more than 3 goals in 13
it's true.
games.
It's true, but he's still very young.
And
people are looking at. I don't think people look at. They're also looking at his international career. So he's already got 10 international goals for his country at the top level. Like this is one for the future. And I think if Chelsea had the luxury of being able to think 3 years in advance, this would be the kind of player they should get. The issue is they don't. The situation isn't good enough for them to be thinking. They need to put their money into someone who's going to immediately affect the way this team plays and provide just that extra bit of depth in attack so that if Nicholas Jackson goes out of form or there's an injury, you have someone pretty competent and someone who in the long term could easily become your starting striker.
Yep.
But alas, I think he's a great player, but I think Chelsea, I would say that it's better to think about someone who can have an immediate effect.
Yes.
The only issue is if it was easy to figure out who that player is, everyone would buy him. So I think, as you said, you're saying someone who wouldn't cost as much, who's in a league that maybe doesn't get as much transfer attention.
Mm-hmm.
But could he be someone who just provides those few extra goals to take you up into the Europa League places? Maybe.
Yes. I've just got in front of me list of international goals by Sesko. So he's had, I believe it was 26 appearances, 10 goals. 10 goals that he's scored. These are some of the opponents that he's had: Malta, Serbia, Norway, Sweden, Romania, San Marino, Northern Ireland, Finland, Kazakhstan. Those are the teams where he scored the goals. Now you can see the majority of those teams are lower level international teams as well.
But you're still at the top level of your competition, and you're only 20 years old. You score against who you're facing.
Yep.
So, no, I get what you mean, but I think he has a lot of talent going for him, and like a lot of Premier League players who go well, he's a big boy. He's 6 foot tall. Oh no, he's 6'4". He's 6'4".
Yes,
he's a big boy.
That's something that Chelsea could
and
use.
It works in the Premier League.
We do need that additional height in our forward pack. Something that we do lack this year with with Christian Nkunku, with who else do we have? Raheem Sterling. Like we have a few short players in our attacking line. So adding someone that with a bit of height isn't the worst option.
And he's a good, and I think Nicholas Jackson is another big guy. He's 6'2", but you're just adding those few extra inches, and it allows you to change, diversify your game plan for games. Yes. So I definitely think that in a league as physical as the Premier League, it's not a bad idea. And I mean, compare that to, and I think it's time we can mention, it doesn't work for all of them though. The fact of the matter is that Chelsea shouldn't need to get a striker because they have someone in the wings. It's just that player isn't living up to expectations.
Correct. I think the main focus should be on a defensive addition in January transfer window. A striker or an attacking player would be a bonus. A defensive addition would be amazing. Someone that can play multiple positions of the defensive line, or potentially a defensive-minded midfielder as well. I have a couple of names. I don't know how much time we have. I think we only have a very short amount of time. I just got a couple of names I can list out to you, Jackson.
Sure.
Polinia plays for Fulham at the moment. He's very transformative for leaky defenses. Due to our injuries and lack of depth in our midfield due to the injuries, I can see him bolstering the squad, and he also brings Premier League experience. The one thing we have with Polinia is there's a bit of competition to sign him from Manchester City. Then you look at my other midfielder that I had listed down. These are just general midfielder options, not necessarily for the January transfer window, just people that could come in and help Chelsea. I had actually from a team we were just speaking of earlier in the video from Everton, Onana. He brings some height, Premier League experience, and he can have a strong rotation as a defensive midfielder or a box-to-box number 8. Negatives are probably 55 million euros, and he wanted to come to Chelsea, or we wanted him to come to Chelsea last season. We had a few failed advances for him, and the question begs is, will he want to come to Chelsea if we are still in the same position as when we tried to recruit him last season with failed advances?
It
And
does weaken your bargaining power for
it
him.
does.
It does.
And then to add on top of that, Manchester United is also in a signing competition for Onana as well.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, yeah, but these are all. It's a good name, but again, the moment there's any competition, it's probably not a matter for January. And I think that's often to do with agents. Agents, if they know there's competition for their player, they'd rather stall it out to the summer when they know they can really get bidding going.
That's correct. Yeah.
So that's why I think, yeah, it can be tricky.
Yeah, that's why those are not for January, but they're some relatively cheapish midfielders that would fit in with our financial fair play that could come in and help Chelsea
Yeah,
in their current squad at the moment.
absolutely. All right, yeah. No, and I think you're right. That will have to wrap us up. We are a little bit over time, so we're going to wrap this up now. But thank you everyone for watching. It's been a little bit, but we hope we got back into the swing of things here and gave a bit of insight into the new topics for the new year. And we'll be back as soon as we can. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. We've got some good topics coming up, so make sure to listen out and keep a keen eye to see on what me and Jackson are going to have a discussion on next. Not an argument, a discussion.
Of course.